Welcome, everybody. Today is Tuesday, July 21st, 2020, and we have a special meeting of Salem-Keizer School Board, and this meeting is called to order. This meeting is online and broadcasted on CCTV Channel 21. As our meeting today is a work session, there is no public comments. The next scheduled opportunity for our public comment is at our regular meeting on August 11th, 2020. Today, we are honored to have two very special future leaders who are joining us. We have actually three leaders who are joining us, but I'm going to refer to two of them. Eddie Binford Ross. She's from South Salem High School. She's the president of a wonderful nonprofit, Live to Tell, and an amazing journalist who's been in the heart of many movements that's going on in our state. The Black Lives Matter. She's been covering a lot of events of very important significance. And she's from South Salem High School, and she's joining us today. And Alondra Valdez Ortiz, another emerging leader from North Salem High School. She has been in multiple forums with North Salem students, and she has worked very closely with our district superintendent and an amazing leader. She has been involved in hiring of our safety and risk management director, the North Salem principal, multiple SRO listening sessions, communication director hiring, and working on a proposal. And I love this, the student advisory to the district-wide decisions. Amazing, go. That's the way to go. Alondra has been part of all this in addition to being a student. I don't know how she manages that, but welcome. And we have Alec. I can't see him anymore. He's somewhere. He's going to be writing a press release about this event today. So I'm going to start with taking the attendance, and let's kind of go around. So we have Director Kylo. Will you please recognize? All right.
I'm here.
Director Hyan.
Here.
Vice Chair Bethel.
Here.
Director Blasi.
Here.
Director Goss. I can't see in my frame because I have a little iPad. Are you there, Director Goss? No.
She's searching for her mute button.
Okay,
She's
okay.
there.
Did you hear Director Goss?
You're still muted, Kathy.
Can Aaron help unmute?
It only gives me the option to ask her to unmute, which I've done. It will not let me take her mic.
All right. Director Leopold, are you somewhere in the phone range? Okay. Director Leopold has asked that if he could be excused if he may be traveling or he's outside the cell phone range, but he may call and join us. And Director Goss, are you there? Director Goss. Well, I'm going to say yes, you are there. I can see you. For some reason, I'm not able to hear you, but all right. Now, let's stand for a pledge of allegiance. Is there a flag somewhere? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Chair Gary, I think I'm on, aren't I?
We recognize
Can you
you,
hear me?
Director Gauss. Thank you for being there. We recognize you. Thank you. There is no agenda modification today. I'm going to turn this meeting over to Superintendent Perry, who's going to introduce a new staff member today. And that's why we have our special guests, our student leaders who joined us. Superintendent Perry.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Chair Chandragiri, Vice Chair Bethel, members of the board. I do have our two students here that Chair Chandragiri has already introduced to you, and they're going to do the introduction tonight. Now that we have some student journalists, I think this might be a way we bring them into the board meeting is it time. So with that, I think I'm turning it over to Eddie first. Is that correct, Eddie?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Eddie Binford-Ross. I am a senior at South Salem High School and a member of the school district's communications team. I am pleased to announce that the new Director of Communications and Community Development is Sylvia McDaniel. Sylvia has more than 20 years of experience in the communications field. This experience ranges from public affairs for the Oregon Department of Energy to communications for Legacy Hospitals in Portland. Most recently, she has spent 5 years working for the Georgia Department of Transportation. In this position, she worked with the CDC and the governor's office to coordinate messaging in response to COVID-19, and she has led numerous projects and initiatives in this position. But experience isn't the only thing that made Sylvia the lead candidate across panels involved in the hiring process. These panels included not only Salem-Keizer staff, but also students from the district and community members. Sylvia appealed to people across these panels, including me, because of her willingness to listen and facilitate dialogue. She made it clear that our voices and perspectives as students were incredibly important to her and that she would always be open for us to share our ideas and our opinions. With Sylvia, I know that my voice and the voice of other students will be seriously heard and considered when making decisions. Furthermore, Sylvia is dedicated to fighting for racial equity, as well as supporting minority students in the district. This type of voice is especially crucial right now with everything going on within our district, our state, and nation. She also talked with us in our interview about how to better connect with everyone across the district, particularly low-income families and other families who are not as connected on social media, where many of our communications go out. I was incredibly impressed during our interview with her, and once I learned more, and I am very, very excited to get to work with Sylvia, and I'm sure good things will be coming from the communications department under her guidance. She is scheduled to start on August 10th, and I hope you will all join me in welcoming her.
All right, Alondra, sorry, I mispronounced you. Alondra.
Hello and good evening to everyone. I am Alondra Valdez. I am a junior and I attend North Salem High School. This is my first year of participating in the hiring process at the district.
Something happened with your sound. You're not muted, but something happened with your sound.
By every single decision in the district. I would say that this hiring process has been crucial to me because we want to make sure that we have the right individual, and obviously that is Sylvia McDaniel. She really left a great first impression as she talked to us about why this would be a great position for her and what her plans are. She also talked with a great confidence and passion. You could tell right away that she wants to make a change in the community for the better and is also willing to take risks. Not just her personality, it's amazing, but her smile is so welcoming, and that's what we need. We need someone in the district that can be serious when it comes to business, but also has a great attitude with the community. Sylvia clearly stood out to us as students. I would like to comment about how easygoing the conversations was, because afterwards we had
Your internet cut out just a little bit again.
And as my peers and I agreed, we came to the decision of, oh, okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yep. Now.
Okay, I don't know what happened. I'm so sorry about that. Okay, can you guys tell me where I left off? What was my last thought that you guys heard from me?
There were a couple places you cut out on. So how about if you back up about 2 paragraphs?
All right, that works. Okay. So I would say I would like to comment how easygoing the conversations were with Sylvia. Most of my peers and I agreed that it was so smooth, and any thoughts we had, we were able to mention them to Sylvia. This change can impact not just North Salem, but pretty much all of our schools. And we are really happy and excited that we get to work with Sylvia, and we hope that as students, we feel comfortable in coming in and sharing our ideas with her, so we can all together become one whole community.
Thank you. Sylvia, welcome. Maybe you have a couple thoughts you might, getting introduced by kids in that way, what can you say?
Wow, I'm just so honored. Thank you so much. Last night, Eddie, was it last night that we had that long conversation?
Yeah, it was yesterday.
I was just so impressed with you. You are going to go a long way, and I want to see you in big places in journalism. Alondra, wonderful. Thank you very much. I feel so welcomed with that. You're going to be a great public speaker, by the way.
Thank you.
So just keep that going. Keep it going. And that smile goes a long way. You're right about smiles. I wanted to say thank you to you two, and thank you to Superintendent Perry and to the board for welcoming me here to the school district. I'm looking forward to coming. Right now, I'm still in Atlanta, and it's probably, I don't know what time it is, probably around 8:30. So if I sound a little bit, it's because it's kind of late here. But again, I just wanted to say hello to everybody. I'm really excited about coming to work for the school district, public schools. I was raised in Salem. I still have family there, and I've told many people this. I still have, my parents were laid to rest in Salem. So I attended Richmond Elementary, Parish Middle School, and North Salem High School. So I was a graduate from there. So it's like coming home for me. So again, I'm looking forward to it, looking forward to working with everyone and getting to know everyone a lot better.
Welcome, Sylvia.
Thank you.
And I promised both of our students and Sylvia they could jump off after they were finished today. So thank you to both of you for your introduction of her.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. With that, we're going to go on to our work session. And Danielle, before you jumped on, we're hoping that you would monitor the chat again. If that works for you, that worked out great for us. And you seem to have the right sequence of knowing kind of when to interrupt us. So I'm going to take the first slides and kind of give you the lay of the land of where we are. And then we'll go into some more depth. We have a couple extra people with us tonight because Melissa is going to talk about special education, and Suzanne West is going to talk some about our English language learners, especially as it relates to EDGE. and the online academy. So with that, this is our update on June 21st. And then at the end of the meeting, we'll ask you, I think we'll want to meet again next week to provide another update as things are continuing to change around us. But again, that's open for you if you think it's helpful and beneficial. I know we've gotten a lot of views of our board meetings, so I think that's also helpful in our community communication as well. So here's where we are. We're now kind of in the middle of definitely reorganizing our teams just a tiny bit. We do have a steering committee at this point. We're including not only cabinet members, but our association presidents and administrators on there as well. We're trying to keep these groups small but inclusive. And so on top of our blueprint teams, we're forming feedback teams. And what we know we're going to need is some rapid cycles of feedback on things. When we get a communication, something done, we need our communications team to give us feedback. And those feedback teams, Craig will talk a little bit more about those, but they will be inclusive of multiple voices in the community. Right now, our school teams are working on their building plans. We have a number of schools who have made great progress. We might even have one or two that are all but finished with the first start of their communication plans. Last week, we were able to begin, we forged a relationship. We had a relationship with Marion County Public Health, but we needed a more systematized interaction with them. So we met with Marion County Public Health last week as leaders, and then we've set weekly meetings with Marion County Health in part to help them review our plans and to know how our plans are laid out. This is going to be really productive for us. We've extended invitation to Superintendent Novotny at the Willamette ESD so that he can also be the sense maker for the other Marion County school districts. So that's going to start with some weekly meetings. Last week, we got the first look at the financial projections from the Ways and Means co-chairs. Remember, the Ways and Means Committee at the state legislature comes out with their recommendation, and it isn't final until the session begins. So today I heard the session is set to happen hopefully within the first couple weeks of August. They school funding and the general fund for across all agencies is top of their list of things to accomplish. The co-chair's budget shows they'll hold schools at the $9 billion in the state school fund by accessing some of the rainy day funds. So that's good news for the way we've adopted the budget at that revenue amount. We Measure 98, they are proposing full funding of, and then on the student investment account, about a third of the funding. So better than we anticipated when we were saying no. A third of the funding for Measure 98 is about $11 million. So still not final until the legislature meets, but it's a really good indication that they're prioritizing schools and that they know that schools are going to be more taxed than ever in the next year. So also in Marion County especially, we are seeing an increase in COVID cases, and we know what those related restrictions mean. But we've got to flatten the curve again, because as it escalates, we're worried about more restrictions. There's some, talk out there about how do we start school in our blended learning model, and when is it safe to start school in our blended learning model? We're hoping to launch the beginning of September, but I am worried that we're going to have to start out in a comprehensive distance learning model. Remember, comprehensive distance learning and the blended learning go together in that if you're not in blended learning as a student, which means some in home and some in-person learning, you are in comprehensive distance learning. So we're keeping a close eye. We're expecting some additional guidance out tomorrow from Oregon Department of Ed, and we know the governor's having a press conference. Most of the schools in the districts in the hotspot areas, and I believe Marion County would be considered a hotspot area, are looking at how do you start a really slow start before you get students into the blended learning. So that's some new thinking and new worries that have happened since last week as we're looking at how do we reenter. So we also have been high in our minds is childcare, and childcare for our employees, but childcare for working parents. And we've been started meeting with our community providers to help figure out how we can support them in expanding options, especially for our own employees, but also for working parents. And then today we did announce the co-principals for EDGE. Artonia Gimmel and Christine Bulby have been selected as co-principals. They expressed interest and went through a small interview process, and we will definitely share a little bit more about where we are with enrollment and all that when we get to that portion of the presentation. And I'll do this shout out for you. Danielle says, go Keizer principals. She has firsthand experience with both of these principals and know the professionalism and leadership skills that they bring, and probably, although disappointed for Keizer, understands exactly why they rose to the top in an interview process. That be a fair statement, Danielle? Yeah. All right. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Craig next.
Oh, sorry. I jumped out. I got a lot of muting and unmuting and turning on the camera and advancing the slide going on. So I just wanted to provide you with a little bit more information about our feedback teams, because we are excited to be able to get more input with those teams. And so as Christy talked about, we're going to kind of have some work teams moving forward, and the work teams will be around operational concerns, which we've talked a lot about those the last couple of weeks, and there's a lot of those with reentry planning, but also instruction, socio-emotional health, and socio-emotional learning, and then communications and engagement. And so these feedback teams will work closely with those work teams to be able to provide more input on critical decisions. There are a lot of decisions in this planning where I wish we could say we have the perfect answer today, but we don't. And we have a lot of big, difficult questions at having licensed teachers, having our support professionals weigh in on that, having specialists related to the work. And so specifically think about people like OT, PT, or itinerant staff who can help us inform what that looks like around cohort tracing. So our feedback teams will be starting to meet. We're getting names for the teams from our association leadership, both on the licensed and the classified leadership. And they'll start to meet hopefully by end of week this week. But if not by then, if we can't get them together by then, by the start of the week next week. And the purpose is to provide feedback, rapid cycles of information. And honestly, the purpose is just to expand our brains and our experience set around these difficult questions, and bring in our teachers who are doing the work and our support professionals who are doing the work to help us guide decisions. So for the communications and engagement update, I'm going to give you just a blush of what's happening in the communications world. There are a lot of things going on right now. We have two sessions this week, and there will be one on Wednesday and one on Thursday. Both of them will be in monolingual sessions, and so we are doing one of them in English and then one of them in Spanish. So two separate sessions with the same information being shared at the sessions. The sessions are going to be kind of outlining our best thinking around reentry right now, but we've heard from tons of our families that it's really hard to make a decision about EDGE until we know more about EDGE and until we can really understand the blended model as a difference to the EDGE model. Asking people to choose is really hard. And so we want to be able to give them as much information that we have right now about the two different models and our best thinking related to those. Another communications step that we're taking are We have a communicable disease plan, which is a very thorough plan that was written by our district nurses with a lot of input from folks around the district. But we want to make that information a little bit more accessible to target audiences, the main target audience being our parents. So we are translating those big documents, which have a lot of medical terms, into documents that are more user-friendly for our community. We're also going to be creating one-page summaries that kind of summarize what do we mean by hand washing protocols? What exactly does that look like? What is this word cohorting? What does that look like? So trying to answer the big questions. What is social distancing and how does that happen at the school level? And then we're also starting to create some videos, both in Spanish and English, summarizing our reentry process and our protocols. Again, trying to get out information in as many different formats as possible. Hopefully you've all had a chance to take a look at the new EDGE website, and the updated FAQs are being updated. I know they were just updated today, so we're getting a lot of questions around this, and we are trying to stay in front of those FAQs. So if board members are hearing questions out in the community that we could add to those, that could have other people know those questions and our answers to them, that would be a great resource for us as well. And then we're continuing to do targeted outreach to students and families. And that outreach looks like doing specific listening groups to families that might not have been able to participate in the community listening and information sessions, similar to when we reached out to some of our marginalized groups and got their feedback around distance learning. Any questions around that, Danielle, before
Yes. So Paul asks how come there aren't parents participating in the feedback teams?
Oh, that's a good, I don't know, Director Kylo, that's a good question. That's a really good question. We were thinking about it more around staff teams, and we're going to have students on there as well, but we hadn't thought about having parents on there. That's something we can definitely consider doing. That's a good point.
And then our Zoom moderator, I think it's Aaron, but I'm not sure, just wanted to put a plug in to be sure folks know that tomorrow's session for the EDGE community feedback, it has ASL interpretation.
Oh.
And maybe we should get that out in a notice somehow to our communities so they can engage.
Thank you for that, Aaron.
And then Dr. Chandragiri asks, as a default, can everyone be enrolled in EDGE if we have to close the school or just blended?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We've had that exact same question from some of our community members as well. Right now, we're considering EDGE as a distinct model because, remember, a blended model, the goal is to get back to in-person instruction. So really the crux of the decision for a parent is, do I want my student to be in-person instruction at some point throughout the year or not? Parents that are choosing EDGE are saying they want a fully online, comprehensive experience that has very few touch points, in-person touch points. But the blended models, which are related to the comprehensive distance learning, our goal with those models is that when it's determined to be safe to have kids back in, we're going to have kids back in as soon as we can. Remember, our biggest preference is for our youngest learners, particularly K2, because we feel like supporting those learners in a way that we can support them in person is super important.
And then, sorry, I'm reading through the comments. Is there a cap on the amount of students for the EDGE program?
No, we had this discussion before. At this point, no. I'll let the cat out of the bag a little bit. We already have 1,000 or so enrollees there. So, and Ethan will talk more about that. But at this point, we aren't capping it. We are doing staffing projections for 2,000 students at this point. But that could be ramped up if we have more students.
And then just for extra boost for tomorrow, on the slide, it shares the community listen information sessions. Wednesday tomorrow, which is the 22nd, is in English. And these are found on Zoom. Is that correct? You can access them via Zoom?
I think they're going to be a Facebook Live events for the community. So they would actually view it on Facebook Live. The moderators and the presenters will be on Zoom, if that makes sense.
Okay, perfect. So I know that it went out in a remind notice via text message. It came in an email. There's a press release, and it's on the district Facebook page for folks who want to find one of those places to figure out how to engage tomorrow night and also Thursday, which is the Spanish speaking format. That's all the questions for now.
Yeah. Thank you, Director Bethel. All right, Mr. Wolf.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Sproles. Just wanted to give you a brief operational update. We have limited planning for our summer programming that's still underway. And really, so what's currently underway right now is the athletic conditioning activities that are at each of our comprehensive high schools. We're assessing the feasibility of starting music activities as well. Later on in the summer, we have Jumpstart Kinder sessions, also a few sessions with elementary school, but mostly secondary with middle and high. We have the summer transition program to help kids that are transitioning from elementary to middle and then middle to high. As Christy said, we also have our blueprint planning sections that are underway for 1 and 3. As a district, we're finishing up assessing the school, all of the capacity. We mentioned this last week for you, green, yellow, red. We have our targeted classroom capacities, 20 for elementary, 23 for middle, and 25 for high school. Also, our transportation routes, we're using green, yellow, red assessment as well so that we can see exactly where we are with respect to transporting the kids into school, starting hopefully in September. And as Craig said, our school planning teams are currently in the thick of it. And they're putting together their school-based maps and really digging into the district protocols that they'll be following when school's in session. Our food and nutrition services program and our partnership with Marion Polk Food Share still going strong. Just a couple quick stats. We've served over 1.2 million grab-and-go meals through our food services program, and distributed over 20,000 boxes of dry goods and fresh produce, meat, and milk with our partnership with Food Share. And kind of a new concept is the District Health Authority. Just wanted to give you all a little briefing on that. We're setting up a sort of a formalized structure that houses our medical professionals, mostly our nurses, the cadre of nurses within the district, which is being led by Jody Peterson, and doing a great job. And so we wanted to have a dedicated structure for student health issues and concerns. And so we're creating what we're calling the District Health Authority, or DHA, and it will really be the main point of contact with the local public health authorities. So it won't be 65 schools calling Marion County. It will be a coordinated effort through the DHA. And we also, this will be the mechanism that will be strengthening our relationship with local public health authorities as well, because once we get into the situations that we need to assess in the fall, we'll need to really understand each other well so that we can cycle through those decisions appropriately. So that's all I have. And if there aren't any questions for me, I will hand it over to Ethan.
There's no specific questions, but I did want to throw a point of praise out there that today during a meeting with Marion County Commissioners, Katrina Rothenberger, the Health and Human Services Director for Marion County, shared her feedback on how impressed she was with Salem-Keizer School District being as large of a body as we are, that you're so far ahead in your protocol, meeting the protocols of the guidelines to reopen schools. So she was she was very happy about that. So good job, you guys.
Awesome.
And
Thank you.
I lied, there's questions. Director Kylo, will we be supplying PPE masks to students and staff? And will we, the district, be responsible for sanitizing the PPE? If not, how will we supervise the cleaning?
So we've got more thinking to do as far as the PPP or PPE. And we'll have to get into a little bit more detail, not in this meeting, but the next, once we figure out some of that. But really, we'll take we'll take the guidance from OHA and ODE when it comes to specific face coverings. But we've got a matrix in place, and we're working it through our DHA structure so that everyone in their particular job function will know what the appropriate PPE is and how best to get it. And as far as cleaning, that's, again, a very detailed question. A lot of the PPE that we're considering isn't, they're face coverings. And we have to be very careful with the supply of actual medical grade masks because there are very, very few situations in our district where any staff member would need that level of protection. But we do know our hospitals absolutely do. So we're sensitive to that.
And then Director Chandra Gary asks if you're involving the local CCO Pacific Source in the process.
I'm not sure exactly how and for what reason we would, but again, our primary interface is local public health authority.
We interface with Pacific Source and have been in contact with them unrelated to COVID. So we have a relationship there, but Mike is right that we have to be directly connected with a local health authority.
That's all the questions.
Good evening, everybody. I would like to provide a couple of updates in the areas related to instructional and social emotional supports in the reentry planning. The couple areas I want to focus on first was on who is leading this work. And the second part I want to talk about is how we're planning right now to move that work forward, especially with regards to professional development, developing curriculum, and also being responsive to updates. So as you can see right here on the first bullet, the instructional leadership team is the group that's been assembled according to our blueprint to help drive our work as it relates to developing, again, curriculum and development, our curriculum and instruction, especially when it comes to vetting our online platforms such as Ingenuity and Florida Virtual. Also, they'll be designing our professional development, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but ensuring that our staff are feeling prepared and ready to be digital instructors as it relates to the digital platforms and curriculum that we'll be using. And also they'll be the group that's really responding to updates provided by ODE and making adjustments and making sure that building leaders have what they need to be prepared for reopening of schools. Now, this instructional leadership team is comprised of cabinet members from the district level, but it's also will include teachers, building administrators, and professional support, or those who are professional support staff. And one thing that I really want to emphasize is how much work that our teachers have done in playing a part in developing our reentry plans and making sure that schools are good to go. So this group will be meeting weekly or as needed, starting almost immediately until we open schools, which we hope to do in September. So let me talk a little bit about what these instructional leadership team, the work that they'll be tasked to do. Can we go to the next slide, Craig? So some of the things that they'll be tasked to do, first thing is that they'll have to work on developing a professional development plan to ensure that our teachers are prepared again, to be digital instructors for our students who are going to be digital learners. So our PD work will continue to expand on the SEL work, but I'll also make sure that our teacher, SEL meaning social emotional leadership work, as well as our culturally responsive leadership training that we left off at in June. But we'll also make sure that we are ensuring that we really got our bearings when it comes to our learning management systems online. So we're going to do a slow roll to the start of the school year. School normally starts the Monday after Labor Day. And instead of welcoming all students back at that time, what we'll do is, after we've already done some professional development work with our administrators and building leaders, we'll use that week after Labor Day to do some professional development work with our teachers and support staff to make sure that they're primed and ready to go when we start welcoming students back. Now, the week after that, we'll again continue that slow roll by welcoming back targeted students or students who may need extra support or time to get acclimated to the digital learning platforms. And so we'll do that on the week of September 14th. And then we intend to welcome all students back for the blended learning model beginning September 21st. That's the blended learning hybrid on-site AB model that we've been discussing. Now, EDGE, on the other hand, we'll begin school. We'll try to begin school on the 8th, or September 8th. And so, as Craig mentioned earlier, we began enrollment last week, and we're already up to 1,063 families or students who are enrolled. And after we have our community meetings, we will have a better projection at how many families intend to enroll in EDGE. Right, as Craig mentioned earlier, some parents haven't made a decision yet because they're not quite sure what their students' educational day will look like in the blended instructional model versus the EDGE model. Some other things that you should know about the EDGE enrollment at this point: it's about a 50-50 split between our elementary schools and our secondary schools, which is encouraging because that means that there's balance. And also it's 5.3% English language learners at this point as well. So we'll have a better indication of what our enrollment will look like for both EDGE and our blended models after we complete our Q&A sessions over the next couple of days. And so one thing that we're trying to encourage our planning teams to keep in mind is that this is fluid work. And so we're planning for 2 different instructional models right now with the guidance from ODE and the information that we've been provided. But we have to make sure that we are operating with a really elastic mindset so that we can be prepared to adjust should we get new guidance even tomorrow from ODE. So something that I hear Jim Orth say a lot is that we're building the plane as we're flying. But with that being said, I think that both our administrative team and our teachers are doing a really great job with being creative, giving us their best thinking, and making sure that we're ready when students return, hopefully in September.
Can I interrupt you?
Oh, that was it.
Oh, good. Yay. So Dr. Chandra Giri asks, is there a plan to do telemedicine for mental health care and healthcare?
I could help answer that one, Christy, unless you want to jump in.
Go ahead.
So we have a relationship with Stronger Oregon, which was a telehealth that we targeted and piloted at a few schools. And we're working with Marion County Health, Polk, Trillium, which we've had longstanding relationships around mental health supports in the community with those 3 agencies, and adding Stronger Oregon to that mix. We would love to be able to provide some support at every school. That's our long-term goal. Right now, we're not there yet, but part of it is a mix of teletherapy, telesupports, and when we get back to school, in-school supports as well with our community partners.
Director Bassi says, it may be a little too early to know, but approximately when will staff know if they are assigned to EDGE or blended?
And I'm going to take that one and let's hold it till John comes on in order, because I think he has a little part of that around staffing around EDGE.
Okay. And then Director Hyatt asks, is Canvas the program that was used in the spring? I think it's start building out courses / classes on Canvas. Is that just you're like outlining them?
So Canvas is the learning management system, which is the hub that is used, the platform that students use to access their work. Now their work will be stored on Ingenuity. So an example is I would log on to Canvas to see where my assignments were on Ingenuity if I'm a secondary student. But I would also maybe have a messaging board where I can interact with my instructors or classmates. And I'd also have a dashboard where I can see what my grade might be in a course, or a space where I can also interface with my classmates. So Canvas is the management tools. Think of it as like the user interface that you might have on Google, like Google Drive, for instance. So that's Canvas, but then our actual content platform that we'll be using is Ingenuity, or for the elementary level, it would be Florida Virtual. And the elementary he saw as a learning management system instead of Canvas.
Is there a way we can go around and ask if any other questions for those who have not kind of used the chat? Director Goss, do you have any questions?
You're off. Oh.
Okay, I did have another question. I thought I sent it to the chat, but perhaps I didn't. I'd like to know if kids that choose programs or have parts of programs that aren't within our building, will they be able to access services from Salem-Keizer, masks, food, library, books, anything of that nature? We have done that in the past with kids that were homeschooled. We're always able to take advantage of some of our services.
So Care and Connection is a really important part of the framework of our EDGE program. And so our two administrators are co-principals of EDGE. Well, part of their task is to ensure that there is that students are staying connected, and also that we continue to inform families of what services we intend to provide, and all those things you shared, whether it's having access to social services, whether they be medical, social, economical, that students continue to know where to access those, but also making sure that students are staying connected to school, to critical school information related to their neighborhood school. Whether that's an activity that they are interested in being a part of, or whether that's athletics that they're interested in participating with as well.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions, Director Blasi?
No, not right now. Thank you.
Or Director Kylo?
I believe mine is in the queue with Danielle.
Okay, all right. If you want to say the question, then I can hear you as well. I have a question. This EDGE, the children who come from, they're a disadvantage, or the people of color, demographically, they're having a very high COVID infection. And is there a mechanism we can have that we can have like a bilingual learning option in case one of them get infected, because they also need that option to access healthcare or access a job, so that we can make sure that they have the IT support available at home, not just for learning, but for other reasons.
So in terms of providing language supports, Suzanne West is about to present on that when we speak a little bit in more depth about EDGE. And so can we put a bookmark or a pin in that question? And I know that she's going to address it momentarily.
Yeah, even otherwise also giving them internet access, even if they don't have, because from a healthcare point of view, if suddenly something changes, that would be really helpful so we don't miss them.
Yeah, and I know that we do intend to continue to provide hotspots for families and ensure that technology isn't a barrier that's preventing students from engaging their learning experience.
Could you comment a little bit on the quality improvement and way you're going to monitor the success of this EDGE compared to, say, already established program, or how are you going to measure on an ongoing basis? This is exactly what we are intending, and we are not kind of sliding back, or the quality is not affected, because from an equity point of view, the outcome should not be compromised.
I'm wondering if we might not answer some of your questions when.
No, that's all right. Just put in the parking lot.
Yeah, and then we could circle back to those if they don't get answered at that moment, at that time.
Thank you.
Any other questions related to just this very broad stroke in terms? I know there's a lot of information, and this is pretty general in terms of our instruction. Really, what I wanted you all to know is that two things. One is who was doing the work, right, in terms of our instructional work group and who's going to be part of that. And then the second part was what our charge was in terms of professional development, slow rollout, and giving you updates in terms of where we are with launching both our blended model and our EDGE Academy. Any questions related to that? We're about to talk about EDGE, but just the big 30,000-foot questions.
The last question has to do with EDGE and whether it's going to be offered for night classes. But if that will be in the next section, I'm sure you can address it then.
Yeah, I'll let Suzanne address that. So I'll go ahead and jump off right now, and then I'll jump in if there's any questions that I can answer after Suzanne West gets an opportunity to speak. Thank you. And actually, I think it's going to be Melissa Glover with Special Services, and then Suzanne West.
Hi, everyone. So trying to tackle special education in a couple of slides is not an easy task. So where I wanted to start to just answer some questions that I know we're hearing a lot of to really help understand how these questions are being answered is really making sure that we focus on remembering that special education is service and not a place. And so as we are working through the different pieces of all of the questions around EDGE and blended learning, throughout every step, we're thinking about how are we providing services to kids to make sure that their learning is accessible and meaningful and that they are able to make progress. So that's just something that I stress a lot, and I just wanted to make sure that I said it here as well, because it helps us sort of frame when we're talking about what is special education and how are we doing this, to remember that it's a service. So one of the main questions that I know that we're hearing a lot, and I wanted to address it right up front, is that EDGE will serve students who receive special education services. There will be special services provided for them through that school, and what that looks like might be different because the general education is different. So when we think about special education services and how do we serve students, the whole purpose of that is to make sure that their learning is accessible and that they are able to make progress in it. And so because the educational platform is different in EDGE, services might look different. And so if they have an IEP now, they will have an IEP at EDGE. They will have a special education case manager who will work with the parent and with the teachers to really design services around what it is that that child needs, so that they can continue to grow in their schooling. So I don't want anyone to think that they can't enroll in EDGE because they have an IEP. We are continuously looking at the enrollment and thinking about what are the needs that we might need to start preparing for so that students have access to their services through that platform. But we're confident that we'll be able to make sure that services are met. So with that, especially with EDGE, we know that it will be important for teams to review their IEPs at the start of the year, knowing that there might be some services that aren't currently in the IEP, but might be needed to access the new learning. And it might be the flip side where there might be something that's currently in the IEP as a service that a child needs, and maybe they don't need it in this new environment. So the IEP and the services will follow, and really it's about the individualized instruction for the student within that learning setting. So I hear the question a lot too, and this is why I called it out in a bullet point here around how will my child get their specially designed instruction and related services. So again, the core purpose of specially designed instruction, and I put the actual definition of it here for you, it's about adapting the content, methodology, or delivery of instruction. So as we think about how does this look for this individual student, what we're really asking is how are we adapting, how are we changing, adjusting, modifying, altering either the content or the methodology or how the instruction is being provided to that student so that he or she can access it. And that's where those things might look different depending on what the learning setting is. And then the other question that we really wanted to address that I'm hearing a lot from families, and I just want you to know as well, is around case management. So there will be case managers within EDGE who really manage the IEPs of the students that they serve. And part of that case management is also working with their teachers to adapt that instruction, to address individual needs, to coordinate services as they might be needed to access learning. But that case management will be very much through EDGE versus the neighborhood school. And so the thought is that we will have a small team of special educators who are very knowledgeable about online learning and understanding how that can be adapted and how students in that setting, and they will be handling the services for special education for students that choose to enroll in EDGE. So as of right now, Ethan shared the numbers for EDGE, and we actually are mirroring what our district numbers are for special education, which is right around 16% of students currently have IEPs in Salem-Keizer. And right now, last I looked, it was right around 16% of students enrolled in EDGE also had IEPs. So we're preparing for students who might need alternate learning materials. Unique learning systems is one of our core. It's adopted district curriculum that many of our classrooms use for students who have very significant learning needs. And we're prepared to address and bring whatever services they might need in whatever setting that family chooses. So those are really the large questions as we start to understand more and more over the next few weeks about what general education looks like for all students at each step of the way. We start wrapping around what does special education then look like? How do we specially design instruction within that setting so that it's accessible to students? Those were the large questions that we've heard. I just wanted to bring those. If there aren't any questions, I think Suzanne is next. Any questions for me on special education?
Nothing in the queue.
Danielle, can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
Thanks, Ron. I wasn't typing fast enough. Melissa, quick question. One of the things I heard, one of the praises I heard from the community around, March and April and May for your programs was that your team was able to call or email or reach out quite a bit to your students. I know that was really, really appreciated. Do you think you'll have the capacity to do that kind of individual work this term again?
I think, our teachers, I'll change that language, our special educators, which includes so much more than our teachers, but all of our staff that work directly to serve students with disabilities are so passionate about making sure that kids are connected to school and to learning. And that's part of why they're in this. And I think that ability to do that in the spring is really what got us through the harder parts of the end of the school year. It was our cup filling to be able to connect with students and with families. And we actually were able to provide some really targeted instruction just on the phone with students as we talked through some social skills, as we talked through their frustrations with their computer, and okay, let's talk about that. How could you deal with that next time? And so I think it wasn't only for us a learning around how important it was to connect with students and families, but we actually identified ways that we could continue to especially design in ways we hadn't thought about before. So I do believe we will have the capacity to do it. And I think there's a strong desire for our teachers and our educators to continue to do it that way because of the growth that we saw and the situation that we help from students.
I have a question, Melissa.
Mm-hmm.
So, with special education,
Melissa, tengo una pregunta.
do our students and their families need any additional support in terms of technology or software or devices in order to fully make use of the digital learning in the setting of special education?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that we know that we learned really quickly in the fall or in the spring was around devices that students use and accessibility options for them. So we have been talking quite a bit around, we have students that Chromebooks are challenging for and really actually work better when there's a touch screen so that they can use the touch screen to be able to interact with the curriculum. Much of our unique learning systems curriculum is used through an iPad or a device that allows for that. So this last spring, we were able to get some touchscreen Chromebooks for some students. We had a number of students that had personal devices that we were able to get to the home so that it was accessible. But that's the one, the touch screen is actually, it came up quite a bit around the need for accessibility for some students for their learning, just because of the features of a computer, of a Chromebook were challenging. So that's really the tech challenge that's probably the most common that we see.
How about any other apps and the software adaptation to accommodate for the, special needs in this, like Sidekick, for example, with students who have autism spectrum? Mm-hmm. Is there any plan to identify if we have to purchase any additional software or apps or assistive devices that go with the touchpad to accommodate,
Yeah, absolutely. So many of our students that need that in this upcoming fall have already needed that. So we have a team, our occupational therapy team, and we have an assistive tech team in our office, as well as an accessible educational material team that really worked together in the spring to create some really easy tutorials on various apps and tools, both for purchase if that was what was needed. But many of them are available and for all. And we were able to kind of come at it from this universal design for learning lens, where we could train all teachers on things like read write through Google and how that could be used so that text could be read aloud to a student. And being able to use something like that for any student, even if they didn't have an IEP, became more of a norm. And that was exciting to see, because the more we're able to embed opportunities like that for accessibility for all kids, the less we need to really target and create something different for individual students. It's making learning accessible from the start.
Thank you.
Anything else for me?
There was no questions in the chat, but I was just curious if Director Goss had any questions.
Director Goss has a new computer and she's doing just fine. Thank you, though. That was thoughtful.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Good evening. All right, my part is focused specifically around the way we support language learners in our district. And I'm going to start by talking about our English immersion programs and what those are and how they would translate to EDGE. So we have a couple of different ways that we embed English as a second or other language into our schools, and this applies both for our elementary level as well as our middle and our high school level. So one way is through structured English immersion, and this is probably the best description for our elementary schools. Structured English immersion is what we call our ESOL classrooms. And those ESOL classrooms have teachers in them that have received some training and some tools and resources to help them help our English learners access content during the normal school day. So it's fully immersed in English, but through specific strategies that are utilized in the classroom environment, students are able to access content. And then in just a minute, I'll share with you what those strategies look like. Sheltered English instruction is used primarily at the secondary level, and it's a similar philosophy, but it looks a little bit different in that there are, again, specific strategies that are utilized, but those strategies are really targeted towards content areas. So for example, there may be strategies that are utilized in a biology classroom for our English learners to access content that are slightly different than what we might utilize in an English classroom or in a social studies classroom. We also have English language development, which is a specific subsection of our immersion programs. English language development is where we really focus and are explicit in our instruction of the English forms and functions that an English learner must acquire in order to become fully proficient in the language. One of the ways that we do that is through targeted focus period of time at the elementary level. That's a minimum of 30 minutes per instructional day. And then at the secondary level, we're moving towards a model of embedding that instruction in a co-teaching model or keeping it as a separate ELD course. I'm starting with this because both of these options will be available to any student that participates in EDGE who is a language learner. So we will absolutely be able to support this because similar to what Melissa said about special education, English learning is really about the strategies that we utilize to meet the needs of students and not so much about the place where those strategies are utilized. Now, it may look a little bit different in a fully virtual environment than it would look in a physical classroom environment, but the strategies will transfer from one environment to the other. What's not included on this slide is another way that we support language in our district, which is our transitional biliteracy program. And that program is focused specifically on our Spanish-speaking students. We support them in acquiring Spanish literacy before we transition them to learning the English language. And we do that because there's a wide body of research that show us that when a student is literate in their first language, they can transfer what they understand about that language into any other language that they're learning. So it's a very successful model to actually help students acquire English. In fact, you've heard before multiple times, our own internal data show us that when we help students become proficient in English, they actually graduate at higher rates than their monolingual English peers. So that's a program that we will also be able to offer in EDGE, is that transitional biliteracy program. As Ethan referenced, we have right now about 5% of our students enrolled in EDGE that are English learners. And we haven't done the analysis yet because we're not done with that application process, but we anticipate that many of those students will qualify for what would have been a transitional biliteracy program in a physical classroom, and we can just transfer what we know about that and what that looks like into this virtual space as well. Next slide, please. So when we talk about how we actually support students, whether it be in EDGE or blended models, what do those strategies look like in those environments? It's important to remember that just like you've heard a couple times today, the most important aspect in any teaching model are the teachers and the instructional assistants that support those students. So it starts there by ensuring that the teachers who are engaging students have the skills and the tools that they need to meet the needs of kids, including kids who are language learners. Some other ways that we'll be able to support students is through direct translation. So for example, in our physical classroom, we do have materials that are available in Spanish. In our EDGE environment, the online curricula that we'll be utilizing translates into multiple languages, not just Spanish, and that will certainly help students access content. There are scaffolds and sheltering that we do in either environment, and that can include the use of visuals, the use of videos, the use of simulations, especially as those have improved over the last many years, to help students understand what the content is meant to convey, even if they don't yet have full command of the English language. We also utilize alternative forms of assessment, and that could be a verbal response rather than a written response. It could be a pictorial response, asking students to draw what they understand. It could be allowing students to respond in their first language. And the reason why this is really important is there's a misconception out there that if a student doesn't understand English, they're not learning what is perhaps being taught in an English-only environment, and that's just not true. Any of us who are language learners know that even if we don't have full command of that language yet, we are picking up some things, and we are learning through observation. And there are multiple modalities of understanding communication, not just the spoken word. So it's really important that we allow our students, whether it be in that physical classroom environment or in a completely virtual space, alternate forms of demonstrating what they have learned. And then last, we use explicit translinguistic instruction. And what that's a big word, but what that really means is helping students make the explicit connection between what they know in one language and transferring that to English. An example of this might be adjectives. So if a student understands what an adjective is in Spanish and knows how to use it in Spanish and understands that the adjective follows the noun, what we have to do then as teachers of English is take what that student already knows in Spanish and help them transfer that to English by showing them that it's still an adjective in either language, but in English, it precedes the noun. It doesn't follow the noun. Once we make that very explicit to students, they can run with that and very rapidly acquire the proficiency that will help them be successful in our primarily English-speaking school system. So we're pretty confident that we'll be able to take what we have shown through our own internal data. We do pretty well in this district in terms of educating our English learners and transfer that into our virtual environment as well. So with all that, what questions may I answer for you?
There are none in the chat box. So if you have a question, I say unmute yourself and go.
I have a question. Now, with this edge, will we be able to offer for a wide distribution in our community? Because right now we have few schools which are bilingual immersion. Suppose we wanted to scale it up and make sure that we have the best practice available to a larger section. Would this allow us, if not now, but at some time in future?
Right. Yeah. I think I need to distinguish between language programs. Thank you for the question. It's a really good question. We actually have two different native language Spanish programs in our district. One is transitional biliteracy. And with that program, students, if a student starts with us in kindergarten, which many of them do, they actually spend the vast majority of their day learning in Spanish. And again, that is because the research shows us that when a student acquires literacy in that first language, in this case, Spanish, they can then more readily transfer what they know to English. We also have a second native language program, which is dual language immersion. The difference between the programs, and it's an important difference, is that in the transitional biliteracy classroom, those students are all Spanish speakers. They're exposed to Spanish in the home. They're supported in their Spanish learning through their family in that home environment. So they come in with a basis to acquire literacy in that language. In our dual language environment, we actually practice a two-way immersion, which means that half the students in that environment speak Spanish and half the students speak English or another language. The two-way immersion, we have not found a model for instruction that transfers well into an online environment. So right now we know we can do the transitional biliteracy and we will offer that. We don't know yet how to do the two-way immersion dual language. That doesn't mean we're going to stop looking, but in all of our conversations and research, we just haven't found a model that we feel will be successful for students in the EDGE environment. And we don't want to set up students for failure in that environment. We'd rather take our time, learn how to do that well, and then implement that at a later date. Does that answer your question?
Can I ask a follow-up, though? I know we're talking about EDGE, but could you just give a couple comments on if we're in comprehensive distance learning or blended learning in our dual language schools?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that will continue as it has. It will look a little bit different because even in blended learning, students aren't in school every day. But we do think that with the time that students will spend in school, that we'll be able to support the acquisition of language for those students who are non-Spanish speakers. Again, it will look a little bit different, and we all just need to be flexible and patient with that for this year. And then because those teachers who are working with those students in a dual language environment under blended learning will also be the teachers that support if we have to move into that dual language environment. We feel like we'll be able to do that short term. Again, it'll be different, but we've gotten pretty used to different, I think, over the last few months. Does that answer your question? Okay. What other questions may I answer?
Dr. Chandagiri asks, what will the teacher-student ratio in EDGE versus regular classroom look like?
Great question. So we're looking at approximately the same ratio through a conversation that we've had recently. We think that at the elementary level, we want to keep it similar to what a typical elementary teacher would experience. At the secondary level, we feel like we can add a few more students, but really not more than +5 to that ratio. We want to keep it at about the same rate for a couple of reasons for this upcoming year. One, we're learning as we go. We think we have a pretty strong foundation to start with, but we want to do this really, really well. So that's the primary reason why we're leaving it there. And two, throughout this year, as we engage in this new endeavor, we need a ton of feedback from our students and from our teachers and from our families about what's working in this model and what's not. And it's going to require, we think, especially from our teacher colleagues, a real good sense of what it takes to educate students well in this environment. And we don't think that significantly bumping up their ratio is the way to gather that information.
Suzanne, so as a follow-up, is there any possibility of after-school program or university students acting like a co-teacher, or what are they called? I don't know the technical term, helping? Just like in our AVID program, some of the university students come to McKay High School. Is there any way to kind of tap into that resource to boost what we are already doing? That way we get some little bit of extra help plus hand-holding for the students.
Right. May I ask a clarifying question? Are you asking if we're going to provide after school, whatever school means in this environment, tutoring for students?
Both tutoring online and also providing the role of a co-teacher along with the teacher in EDGE. Because then they can get it from the campus or from distant locations. These university students can assist the teacher.
Right, I see what you're asking. So whether online or in a physical classroom, we're still bound by the same TSPC requirements for who can teach. So we can't have a non-licensed university student be a teacher in a virtual space, just like we can't have a non-licensed university student be a teacher in a physical space. That doesn't mean there's not a place to invite university students in to support in an online environment in some way, like tutoring, like providing additional practice opportunities for students. It just can't be as a teacher because we can't violate that TSPC requirement.
Well, not as a teacher, but I think they have provided some waiver to have like in our CTech program, we have a non-teachers who have ability to be like what are they called, co-teachers. So there may be a primary teacher, but there will be somebody from the university who works with them. And this, we can ask for waivers, especially when hard to hire faculty, because some bilingual, bicultural faculties, we don't have a proper representation. So can we ask for a waiver from that?
Potentially, that's something that we can explore if we run into that need. And to your first point, if we do have a primary teacher, we can certainly invite somebody in to support in that environment, but we need to have that primary licensed teacher. So I'll make a note of that because that's an interesting idea for us to explore. Thank you. What other questions may I answer?
That looks like it's all the questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sorry, Suzanne, I think there was a question earlier on about are we exploring evening classes at all for EDGE? And I do think the answer is not right now, but with our planning principles, maybe?
Correct. At this point, we don't have any plans to have alternate times to the school day. But the one thing that EDGE does provide for students who are involved with EDGE is that they have a lot of flexibility in when they actually do their assignments. There may be scheduled live events or synchronous events that take place at some point during a typical day that students could attend or perhaps watch later if they're recorded. But then when they actually apply that learning, practice that learning, submit assignments, there's a great deal of flexibility in that. And that could take place at any point during the day, any day of the week.
Thank you.
Christy, there was a question.
May I add on to that just for a moment? This is Ethan. The EDGE model might incorporate a style of instruction called flipped learning, where students could often access lessons that are pre-recorded by teachers. And then oftentimes the synchronous component is almost like an office hours or a class discussion. So students will have a lot of flexibility in terms of how they engage their learning as well. So even if they're not able to access the live events, they should still be able to get a fairly robust opportunity to engage their learning.
Thanks. And did you say there's another question, Danielle?
Yeah, Director Blassie had a question about teacher assignment timelines, and I just wanted to be sure it didn't get missed, and I didn't know if it looks like it may come up later, but I don't know.
It still will come up.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I believe that John is next, so he may have some information to share.
Thank you. Good evening. We're going to transition to a little more operational talk as we've been talking about EDGE. And so there's some updates that I wanted to share. As we just discussed, there is going to be a similar staffing ratio in that program. And we're currently working on building a staffing model to support enrollment in EDGE, estimating about 2,000 students. We needed a starting point, and we know that that's an estimate that may go up or down. But in order to have an opportunity for staff to understand what the teaching assignments may look like, we need to have a model and a process by which to staff that program. So we're actively doing that, and we'll have additional information over the next couple of days. We've had really great collaborative conversations and communication with our associations because, as we know, this will look a little bit different for many of our teachers and instructional assistants.
So, John, before you go on, I just want to comment a tiny bit further. Right now, for Director Blassie's question, we're really trying to identify the process for selection, because what we know is we do have a number of at-risk employees. What we believe is that there will be more at-risk employees than we need in EDGE. That's what we're worried about. Or if not more, that we'll have them in the right licensure areas. So we're hoping that within the next 7 days, we can outline here's what the process is, and then we'll communicate it out to our through our communication channels, including probably one of our district-wide staff meetings. So that's kind of the next thing that's coming with the staffing. We also know that because of the way we are doing the blended learning model and the change of schedules, that it could also cause some changes in staffing in other places in the district. So we're just trying to take it kind of one step at a time. And again, we know that we have a good number of at-risk employees, and we've done some initial surveying, but we think the number's higher than the initial survey. And our associations have a survey out asking some questions, and then we'll probably have to do some direct asks of people to identify with at risk. So sorry if I stole some of your future things, but.
That's all right. Well, a couple of those were in the future and a couple of them clarified. And while we're clarifying, I'll add a little bit more. Because we're not changing the total number of teaching and support staff, we're also watching to see if there's differences across the district where students may sign up for EDGE in some schools more than others, and how will that impact the staffing that need to remain at a particular location for the blended learning versus buildings that may have more students participating in EDGE, where it would make sense to have some of those staff follow the students to the EDGE learning platform.
And then Director Beth, the last follow-up question, and I think it's related. We do have a few educators on the administrative transfer list that don't have a home yet. And I'm assuming that's your question, Danielle. And how do the administrative transfers that don't have a home fit into our timeline and process?
Yeah, great question. Every year, of course, we, in a typical year, we have enrollment changes at schools, and we have staff seeking changes in assignment. And there's a number of folks that are transferred or relocated as part of that process. When we switch to distance learning and continue to get new information about how we need to provide different learning opportunities next year, staff will need to adjust to that. And we put a pause on the assignments in order to get some better estimates like we're talking about today, in order to avoid giving staff an assignment that we learn 2 weeks from now has to be changed again. And so we know that it's important for teachers and staff to have plan time to anticipate what they're going to be doing in the fall. And so we're working as quickly as we can to make sure we have estimates that are close enough to take action on. And we anticipate that happening in the next week to 10 days so that we can communicate with staff where they will be assigned.
We feel bad about the about people that are hanging there, and it is, as you can imagine, the most complicated staffing scenario that any of us have ever tried to put the pieces together on. So
the amount of moving parts is exponentially greater this year, and we are very sensitive to staff who are caught in the waiting period, and really we really appreciate the patience of our staff. And I'm going to talk about some other ways that staff has been amazing during this time. Switching a little bit to the CARES Act and WorkShare program, you may recall we talked about this a while back when the decision to access that federal stimulus money that came in the form of the CARES Act offered us the opportunity to have employees participate in taking furlough days that would then give them access to that benefit money and offer the district the savings from those wages. And I just wanted to provide the board an update tonight that that started back in May, and staff who worked during those weeks took 1 furlough day a week, or the equivalent to 20% reduction in their work time. And that comes to an end this Friday. And that's because the federal program ends on Saturday, the 25th. But we have been continuing to work with the employment department and process a significant amount of information every week related to that. We're excited to report that beginning late last week, we're now having employees start to receive their benefit payments from participation in the furlough days. And so those payments will continue to happen after this week until they have been compensated for all of the reduction in days that they qualified for. The communication, sorry, Craig, just going back a little bit. The communication with the employment department happens. I want people to know we communicate daily with them. They have staff working very hard to help answer questions. And we really appreciate that our employees have been coming forward with really good questions that help us update our question and answer page and also help inform communication that we can send out. And we've just continued to update information that gets pushed out on an ongoing basis. And so we're excited that people are receiving payments, and we're grateful for their patience and their good questions. Something that we haven't talked about, but I wanted to make the board aware of, is that like the CARES Act, the federal government has also put in place the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And this is mandated federal legislation that provides paid leave for employees who meet qualifying criteria and are unable to work due to COVID-19 health condition or COVID-19 related childcare need. And this is not reimbursable, but it does offer employees up to 2 weeks of additional paid time if they meet the qualifying conditions that are outlined in the law. And it also can provide additional time specific to childcare needs at a reduced pay rate. So we're providing information later this week and next week that will help employees know how to access this leave as it's available through December 31st. I wanted to highlight that one of the benefits that I'm really excited to share, we talked about this previously during updates with executive orders from the governor. And you may recall that when schools were initially directed to close but continue to pay staff, we of course were happy to do that. There was an executive order then that replaced the initial order, and it didn't require schools to continue to pay staff, but we felt it was important for supporting our staff and providing continuity of service. And we made the decision to support staff who were unable to work because of a high risk or COVID-19 health condition through the end of June, knowing that for folks that are unable to work going forward, they may be able to access additional leave under the FFCRA that we just talked about. But if they're not able to qualify for that leave, they will be supported in accessing their contractually provided leave. So there's sick leave, their personal leave, vacation, if they have that available to them. As we've talked about a little bit, we've been in regular meetings to discuss the operational changes with our associations. We're really grateful for their collaboration and partnership with us because oftentimes we get new information and sit down with them to talk about it before we know what we need to do with it. It's been really helpful to listen and understand employee needs as we communicate and as we make decisions about how to put these things into practice. We established a shared understanding of program and operational changes that do not require a change to existing collective bargaining agreements, and that really helps us expedite the work. There are occasions in some of the legal mandates that don't align with the current collective bargaining agreements, and we are formalizing those agreements or may bargain when changes require us to do so because it doesn't meet the current CBA directions. And so before we go on to next steps, questions about all that information?
There's nothing in the chat box, and everyone's shaking their head no.
I just wanted to ask a general question in terms of, does this cover the liability part of the organization and the district? And how is that factored in all this discussion?
Are you talking about liability of employees that are at risk, students that are at risk?
Correct. Talking about the liability of the employees, or so how is there a malpractice, just like we have a malpractice for doctors, or is there anything like a umbrella coverage that will protect us, or is there
well, Mr. Wolf can talk about the general self-insurance and liability that we operate under all the time. But you raise a really good point that I want to emphasize, which is this is really, really important work. And I should have said this at the outset, but the health and safety of our students and our staff and our community is the first thing that I put on the top of our meeting conversations about all of this work. Because everything that we decide about implementing regulations and requirements needs to be with a lens of health and safety and equity. And I jumped right to the details today in my presentation, but it's really important to think about it from that perspective, because yes, we need to comply with things, but we never want to create situations that our employees or our students or our community feel like is jeopardizing their health and safety.
And I think that's why we're beginning to have conversations in many places, I think, in the state around can we really start school in a blended learning model and bring kids in a way that prioritizes health and safety, and especially when there's places where COVID is on the rise, including Marion County. There's also some places in the state that don't have COVID on the rise and can start bringing kids back and staff back in safely as of this date in July. And then how do you prioritize that against the real need to have kids in classrooms for learning and having social interactions for their own mental health, including, activities, extracurriculars. So it's a balancing act. The liability question is that I think there's all kinds of liability issues all over the place, in every place in the state right now. Mm-hmm. And there's no one right answer.
Is the reason I'm asking is, is this a question that we need to bump it up for, say, the state level through OSBA or others to say, is there a way to indemnify or kind of at least define, clarify, because this is an uncharted area where nobody has experienced anything like that.
I believe it's already been elevated to the state level. I know OSBA is talking about it. I'm assuming it's been elevated to the governor's office as well. And I can check on that, but it's a high topic of concern, and it's a concern for OSBA because they have their insurance program that they run. So they've been talking about it as well. So I think it's elevated.
Thank you.
Craig,
is there any other questions? I wanted to make sure. Director Goss, do you have any questions to add? I've not heard from you. Director Kylo, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Director Kylo. Director Blasi.
No, thank you.
Okay. Daniel, do you have any other questions in the chat room?
No, sir.
All right. Director Hine, do you have any questions? We haven't heard from you.
No, thank you for checking though.
All right. I can't see everybody's window when the slides are up, so in my iPad, so I don't want to miss anybody.
Yeah, so I'll wrap it up at the end, and then I'll open it up for if you have any comments about next steps with you. So my question is this format helpful? I know it gives you a lot of information. We are still, kind of in the middle of the walkthrough of building plans. Tomorrow we're awaiting more guidance. I believe it will be more stringent guidance for how we reopen schools. I'll do my best to get an update to you. I need to be prepared for if there is really any major shifts that we can present a few of those shifts right at the beginning of any meetings with our parents tomorrow night. And then we're leaving September 8th as that slow start begins date on our calendar. So if I could just get some feedback from the board, is there a key topic for next week? And is this format helpful? That would be my question of the night.
Director Kylo, let's kind of go around and make sure we don't miss any important.
I'm just concerned about the PPE issues right now. So how those will be handled, but that's it.
Director Goss.
Yes, I do have some things to say, but first, to the superintendent, I think after the learning sessions go public this week, we'll have lots of questions. Those people are very creative, I think. And I would like to see you bring those back because there'll be questions I'm sure we haven't thought of.
And I think we'll get some themes that maybe will help shape next week in our presentation next week as well.
Dr. Chandragiri, are you there?
Yes, I am. Go ahead.
Okay, I have a few things to say. May I have the floor for a couple of minutes?
Please.
I thought about the meetings the last several weeks, but the turmoil of our district is very surprising to me. I have listened and read in literally hundreds of public comments. I owe it to the board and others to be clear about my position. I have been very quiet, and I realize that, and that isn't typically like me. You will not agree with many of the things I have to say. First on the agenda is the fact that I certainly support many of the tenets of Black Lives Matter, but I have trouble and I feel bad for the infiltrators that come within those groups or join them that cause so much vandalism and violence and chaos. Thinking about this, the fear that they instill in parents and children serves nobody's interest at all. To go on, the fear being created bothers our families, and to that end, it causes us at times to misunderstand what families want. Along that same line, the more you think about it, we all do have the same rights. We were born with inalienable rights. And I wonder if that shouldn't be recognized as a platform to come together, all of us, and those minorities as well. Discrimination at the beginning of the trouble we're facing. I have broadened my definition of the word to entail anything that is even slightly different between us, whether it be race, sexual orientation, mental ability, or many other things. Discrimination has led to an opportunity gap for lots of families and their children in our district. This is hard, particularly on students of color. I've listened and I've learned. We must take action now to change that. In the past several months, I've become very aware that our students of color fear the police or the security officers in the schools. I show my
Director Goss, I can't hear. All right. Maybe we can kind of go around, and when Director Goss joins us, then we'll probably. Director Blasi, do you have anything?
I think Christy was asking if this is helpful, and I think it really is. And to Kathy's point, there might be more questions that come out of tomorrow's listening sessions, and you might be, getting answers for those. So if we could do this again, I think it's really, really beneficial. Especially now we know the community is watching these as well. So I think it gives them another venue to hear updates. So thank you for hosting these and for asking us. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Blasi. Vice Chair Bethel.
I agree with everything Sharon just said. I think we're all receiving a lot of different questions. I received a spreadsheet of questions the other day. And I think that a lot of the questions get answered in these sessions. And I know that your staff are doing a really incredible job of trying to respond to the pelting of emails I'm sure they're receiving from not just our staff in the district, but the families. I hope that next week there are themes that are generated, and I hope that the staff engage tomorrow and Thursday, particularly around the EDGE concerns that they have, because I think there's a lot there. But they are helpful for me. It's a lot of information trying to navigate just as a parent what to do with my own kids. I'm still on the fence. I am still very hopeful that here's a question that just popped into my mind that's been pretty regular. Sorry. If I have two kids in the system and we do the blended model, what's the chance that they're on the same day? So that way, if I'm a single parent, I don't have to miss 4 days of work. I can just miss 2.
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and one we believe we have the answer for, which is even better. We're going to try to register kids into cohorts by families. And so we're going to do home address, not parents, but home address. And then so that will be our first run, that, all the students at this address get assigned to the same day. We're going to see how that shakes out. We may be able to have an exception to that if people need to switch cohorts. But the first thing is, can we accomplish getting all the students? So that will be our first stab at it. We've started pulling families by household so that we could see where they are and where our numbers are and how we schedule around that. So that's our goal.
Director Hyen, do you have any?
Actually, sorry, I'm eating my dinner and I didn't want to gross everybody out. That's why I turned off my video. I think they're very informative, and it really helped me to get the slides ahead of time so I could look through them and make some notes. And if anything I was, didn't understand, I could mark it on the paper. That was so helpful to me, Alice. Thank you very much. I think these are great, and I will be interested also to hear what kind of feedback and questions we get from families on Wednesday and Thursday of this week. So I look forward to next week's meeting.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
Comment on the slides too. I think realistically, it's an hour or two before the board meetings. So sorry we didn't get them by Friday, but I just think realistically, that's going to be the best.
It was in time. It was in time for me to print them and glance at them. So it was in time.
Okay. As soon as they're done, we will send them to you at whatever point that is.
Director Goss, are you back? Daniel, can you see Director Goss in the windows and anywhere? Okay. Is Jesse, Director Leopold, are you anywhere in the cell phone range? No? All right. I really appreciate Superintendent Perry and all your staff. This is amazing. This is a very complex operation with so many moving parts. It's perhaps the most complex system that you're dealing with. And this uncertainty is going to continue. And the fact is, you're also kind of building in the possibility of being flexible. It's really important to bring it. It not only helps us ask questions, but it helps all of us kind of process it. And the most important thing I would ask all of us, including the community, to please be kind, because nobody knows. We all have to have that ability to be adaptive and flexible when it comes to so many things, keeping in mind the safety and so many other moving parts. So please be kind to our district leadership, to all the staff, all the educators, because they have put in so much of love and kindness and thinking while they are also immersed in the same thing. So, we all have to know that we don't have definite answers, but keep that possibility. Let's be nice to each other, kind to each other, help each other. If anybody has some good ideas tomorrow, please let us know, and let superintendent and our team know, and keep working with us so that we can keep updating it as we move along. This is not like anyone knows the correct answer. Being in the healthcare, I can tell you just have to deal with what's right in front of your nose sometimes. And as long as we can work like good team, good partnership, think through this, we will all come out fine, and we can understand the risks. Every model will have some risks and benefit, and we'll take them. I have Director Goss on the line, so let me try to see. If you don't mind, let me take this call. Kathy, go ahead, and missed you. Okay. Oh. No, don't apologize. It's not your fault. It's the technology that it's okay. You could even write your message and send it to us. We'd love to hear the written one. That way we don't miss any word. All right. Well, that would be wonderful. I'll make sure that you start. You can even give us a written one, and you also get to read that written one next time.
Sorry to interrupt.
All right.
Superintendent Perry, did you have something that you wanted to finish with?
Yes, now we'll go back to Superintendent Perry.
I think I just wanted to say, yes, grace for tomorrow and the next 2 nights as we maneuver technology. I think this is going to be so good for us because it gives us a platform for the future, but it also is under it's hard to try the platform in a space where we know that the questions are so many right now, and the pressures not only on our staff but on our families are so many right now. So if we don't, if it doesn't turn out the best with technology, we'll try it again. We're going to persist on finding really strong ways to communicate and get questions answered. So thank you. And we'll be back next week for another round.
Yeah. I think with that, I want to say, don't even look at it as a failure, look at it as a learning opportunity, and we will go from that. So this is like, everything is a beta version, so we will get there and we'll come out great. And so with that, our meeting is adjourned, and have a nice day and be safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you.